somebody took the tests, they got the questions, and they just simply pass it around so another officer can sit and let the video play while he's doing other stuff. When it comes to the test, oh, yeah, that 1 is A, 2 is C. They ain't learning nothing, but we're allowing it to happen. And, like, for instance, our training. Yeah, so if you pay for one of our courses, you only get that. If your buddy takes it, he's going to have to pay for it as well. But let's say they do that or whatever. Every few months, we go into our quizzes and jumble up the questions and answers. We either put in new questions or we jumble them up to where you have a list all you want. Mm-hmm. Your buddy may get it, but 2 buddies down the road ain't going to get it because we've jumbled the questions. Because I don't want to set a system up where officers are not being trained. They're just they're cheating is what they're doing. But the system is allowing it. Right. So is online training good? Yes, it is. Do we need a little more controls? I think we do. In fact, our training, and I'll get off this topic, and I know this ain't a commercial about us, but we're talking about online training problems. Our training, when you watch our videos, there are proof of watch images in there, like a cat may walk across the screen or a police car may drive across the screen. That's a test question. If you don't answer that test question, you fail the test, which means you have to interact with my video. You can't turn it on and go answer a call. Well, anyway, You've got me on my soapbox, but I'll come back down, Mike, and let you continue.
No, that is so powerful. And I'm glad you got onto your soapbox because, that's what my company is based on. We have tried to correct that issue because we're doing our officers a disservice by allowing this kind of training into our agencies because they're not getting anything from it. And we're just checking a checkbox that says, child sex abuse training, check, when they didn't get anything from it. Like you said before, they may have watched the same video for the last 3 years. They don't remember any of that because their buddy had a printout of the test answers.
And we're talking of the truth here. Everybody that hears us will probably shake their head. No,
yes,
it's true. That's not good training. That's not good training.
And just to let you know, I don't know if you looked at my site or anything, but the way that we've structured our online training is it's set up like an online college class. Yeah. Our class is like a 40-hour class. I have an instructor development class that's up there now. It's over 5 weeks, just like a college class is. And students are required to go in and, there's lectures in there. They're not necessarily videos, but there's audio where they have to kind of scroll through PowerPoint and stuff like that, which, yes, that's boring. It's not the most effective way. But they also have assignments to do where they have to do discussion posts about the topic that we're studying that week. They have to interact with other students, just like in a college class. I don't know if you've ever seen an online college class, but you have to get away from click and play on a video screen, walking away and hoping that video is done when you get back. So I'm glad you got on your soapbox. I think that's powerful stuff.
I think online training is fantastic. It's very well needed and it still helps the budget, but I think we need to do it correctly and not just, push them through an assembly line.
I tell you what, I would be interested in seeing how you guys do your online training one day.
Yeah, I'd love to share it with you.
Off of our soapbox and back to the questions. What's the most critical skill you think police instructors need to master in order to thrive today?
Well, I think number one, and I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before a little bit. Number one, embrace online training. We've just talked about the negatives, but there is a lot of positive. There are a lot of police instructors out there in the country that still don't embrace online training. Embrace it. It's here to stay. Just do it right. Do it the best. But then the other thing is to stay relevant. Stay relevant. Make sure that you are staying trained and that you are teaching relevant topics. I think those are the two biggest things that police instructors need to think about. If they're going to continue on in a career, and if they're just an instructor that works for like an academy and they're not their own company, the same thing applies. They need to stay relevant because if they've been teaching the same textbook for ever how long, they probably need to look for a new textbook because there's things are changing. Right. When I started teaching police officers in the 90s, just as a patrolman, I would just teach classes and I just always liked teaching. I didn't teach about DNA in the 90s. We didn't have it, right? So if you're still teaching a textbook from the early 2000s, that textbook, okay, most of it's relevant, but a lot of it isn't. So stay relevant and stay up to date is one of the biggest things instructors need to think about.
You know, we're responsible for learning a lot of things as police officers, especially when we're first starting out. And you bring up a good point. It is a fluid thing. We never stop learning. It's a continuous process from the beginning of our career all the way through to the end. It's important for instructors to stay on top of those trends and things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
So when it comes to developing and implementing effective police training, what's the most influential lesson you ever learned from one of your mentors, and how did it help you become the leader and trainer that you are today?
So, you sent me that question ahead of time, and I have to admit that I've struggled with it a little bit because it's kind of a two-part question. One of the things that has led me in how I teach today and how I instruct the students is this. And I'll explain why in a minute. But I had an old retired CID officer become our chief deputy back years ago. And he was, to me, he was old when he started, even though he wasn't that old. I was young. But I was a young detective. And I got so aggravated, as I'm sure all your listeners have been, work our tail off to solve a case. And then they either go free or something isn't charged or there's some problem. And it aggravated the tar out of me. And I was voicing that one day very loudly. And Major called me and he, "Deputy, come here in my office." That's how he talked. I said, yeah. So I'm in there and he says, the quicker you learn, your job is to be a cop and their job is to be judges and lawyers, the further you're going to go in this career. It ain't your job to send them in jail. It's your job to complete the case. Well, that has stuck with me, and it allows me not to get so mad. I still get mad, but not as mad. But when I teach, that's one thing I teach my students is that we're not judges and lawyers, and most of us don't want to be. We need to do our job so perfect that the judges and lawyers can't even screw it up. And if they do, that is totally off of us. We can wash our hands and say we did the best job. So I want to train my students in such a way from the time they get the call to the time they testify in court that I'm doing the best I can to train them to be the best cop, the best investigator they can, so that we can help these uneducated lawyers and judges to not let bad guys go free. So that's probably been the thing that shaped my entire teaching career, was that one statement from that old major. Yeah.
So if there was a magic reset button as it relates to course creation, what systems would you go back and put into place sooner rather than later, and why?
So I think one of the things that I would do would probably, as from the business side, would be to get an email list started earlier. An email list meaning people that are interested in our training and things like that. So one thing I delayed in doing, and as a company, as a company level, we need to interact with our people more. And so I think that's one thing I would like to go back and get an email, not to spam people, but to give people who really want to know about our information, the information. And we delayed on that a long time because I didn't want to be in people's inbox all the time. Well, now I've learned that hey, that'd be one thing I'd probably wish I'd started earlier.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's one thing that I haven't done.
Right. And most people want to hear what you have to say. I mean, they want to hear about training or what's coming up. And I was hesitant on that because I didn't want to be the spammer. But I'm not. They're asking for it. I'm not pushing it on them. They're signing up for it. So now I'm giving them the last couple of years, I've given them the option to sign up, and now they're liking it. And if they get to the point that they don't have that job or they don't want it anymore, they just hit unsubscribe. Yeah. No hard feelings. It's not for you no more. That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can kind of relate that to training here at our department. Just to give you an example, over the last several years, we rely heavily on a system that you kind of talked about, that we won't name any names of the companies, to do our in-service training and stuff like that. And, I've been back doing the training coordinator for the past 3 years. And when I went back there, I'm thinking, we need to get away from this. And slowly but surely, we are starting to move away from that. And it's good to hear the officers say, I'm looking forward to the in-service day that we're having today. I'm actually looking forward to it. And they do. They look forward to being able to interact with other students or other officers, their friends, they'll go in there and they'll schedule their in-service training day for that same day. So, it kind of relates back to what you were talking about, being able to communicate with the people that we need to communicate with, having an email list on the personal side or the business side of things, but also being able to communicate with the officers and understanding what it is that they really want in their training. Because, over the years, we heard, after we had done the online training for a couple of years, we heard the grumblings and the complainings, but we're thinking, are they really, really unhappy with it? But now we know, because yes, they're actually excited about the in-service training that we're getting ready to do.
Right. And again, it isn't that online training is bad. Bad online training is bad.
That's key right there. Bad online training is bad. So what one strategy or recipe that we as course creators could consistently use or apply every day would you recommend?
Now, I may be thinking about this a little bit differently, because as course creators, we're instructors. I'm thinking probably from the business side of the program, maybe, because my first answer of that was build community. That kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, I guess, but building a community of people around us if we're wanting to create a training company. Again, I guess if it was just a course creator, meaning a trainer within a department that's creating courses, then again, I think that would just be what I said a while ago, is to remain relevant and develop teaching styles. Everybody that's listening right now, no matter where you're at, just raise your hand, because you look stupid. Raise your hand because you have been in front of a boring instructor, right? Nobody likes boring instructors. So if you are a boring instructor, either do us all a favor and quit, or learn how not to be boring, because you're not going to give your students the training they need if you're boring. So the one thing an instructor can do is to make sure they're looking at those evaluations, and if they're boring, fix it, because boring instructors are the worst.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Now, what would you recommend, or what are some suggestions that you could give the listeners to help do that? If they find out, or that they believe that they may be a boring instructor, what are some things that we can do as instructors that can help us keep the students engaged and keep their attention?
So a couple of things. And no matter where you're at, there's probably a Toastmasters group, and Toastmasters is they usually meet at lunchtime and things like that, small community events, things like that, and they help you be a better speaker. So a Toastmasters organization you can get involved in. Something else, and it sounds kind of difficult, but video yourself teaching. So if you're going to have a class of students, that'd be fantastic. If you have a class of students, have somebody video you, then watch yourself. You wonder why these NFL players and these basketball players win these big championships. It's because they watch their mistakes, and when they're done with the last game, and they win Super Bowls because they watch the other team's mistakes and know how to fix it. So we need to watch our own mistakes. And then the other thing is, really ask people that'll tell you the truth. If you're Captain Smith, don't be asking the rookie, because he ain't going to tell you the truth. But go ask that old sergeant. Go ask that lieutenant. He's going to say, Captain, you're boring.
Yeah.
Go ask somebody that can tell you. And then if you are, then start making, again, recording. And funny story, when I first started teaching, and I didn't think I was communicating correctly, and I wanted to get good in front of camera, because I started doing online training. It's hard to get good in front of camera sometimes, because cameras sometimes are more intimidating than people. True story, okay? I took every stuffed animal and doll I could find of my kids' and set them up as an audience and a camera, and I taught the class to a bunch of stuffed animals. Call it stupid, but it was difficult. Nobody in the room but me and a bunch of stuffed animals. After 4 or 5 times of that, I was able to see how I was teaching, my facial expressions, things like that. And I was able to make improvements that then evaluation started even reflecting that. And I didn't get a whole really bad evaluation before, but I started getting even better evaluations because I wasn't as nervous interacting in front of cameras and stuff. Cameras are a lot harder than people.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So I'll get into the last question. Imagine you're standing in front of a room of police instructors, people just like you and me. They're battling their way through fears, worries, doubts, struggles even.